I'm so excited that we get to record our conversation because you and I have had so many, and this is the first time we get to record one. So I'm excited.
Well, everything's recorded, really, just not necessarily in the cyber network.
Yes, this is true. So I think a great starting place for us would be to introduce yourself and go from there.
Well, who am I in this incarnation is not so important as who I was in the other incarnation, which was, since I was young, I've had memories of being in South America and, what is known as an entity by the name of the Feathered Serpent, Plume Serpent, or Viracocha, all the same being, essentially. And that being went throughout South America, teaching how to use the Earth grid to create nutritionally dense food and have bounty wherever you were on the planet, and as well as teaching people how to utilize what the planet really is to create the conditions for peace and harmony. As I went through life, I sort of remembered more and more of these situations and memories until, it's like a person that's coming out of the closet, eventually reached the point where those memories were consciously integrated, and going back into my human existence on Earth here in this incarnation is not overly important because it just provides sticking points to people. But there were signs, like I was born in the exact center of British Columbia, was, always an unusual child, did things very early, etc. But that's not as important as to, why am I here? Well, the reason why I'm here now is because this knowledge needs to be remembered and relearned on the planet. And that's sort of like the raison d'etre or mission of this incarnation. So it's a big rabbit hole to answer the question of who am I? Well, names aren't so much as important as fruits. And there's a passage that says, by their fruits you shall know them, right? What are the actualizations of these things? Somebody who says that they're, so-and-so from Atlantis and they're here to teach people how to do something, but then can't do the thing they say they're here to teach, does that mean anything that they've said they're from Atlantis? Well, and does a person who doesn't remember that they're from Atlantis but is teaching all the information from Atlantis, does it matter that they remember that they're from Atlantis? No, although those things don't really matter, people can get caught up in identity politics and saying, well, you're not, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, I don't care. Yeah, I don't care who you think I am. I don't care who anybody has issues with, certain names and certain loaded concepts aren't of interest to me. What's of interest to me is getting this information out to the public and getting the knowledge that was once standard to be standard again. And that is what's important to do in this incarnation. So, I can go into how things my whole life were unusual, and I don't mind if that comes out in the fullness of time in our conversations, but to focus on that right now is a bit premature and potentially distracting.
Right.
What I can say is that I have the information that provides a holistic and integrated awareness of what the planet Earth is and how to use it for maximizing both nutritional density in food and harmonious behavior in humans.
Right.
This is a science, and as something from that side of things can be tested and proven. So does it have an art component? Sure. However, the foundational reality that it's based on is consistent and replicatable. In a way, this is the joining of the two hemispheres of the mind, the right and the left, the science and the art, or the science and the spirit, in essence a unified field. I've met people my entire life who have said to me, well, you happen to have answers to questions we've posed my entire life. And so as I've gone through my reawakening to the point where I can say this is who I was, this is who I am, and this is what I'm doing, have been much like your own situation. When you met me, the things I do and say are often contrary to what people have been told is a new age or woke perspective, yet the information that you encounter bears out over time. So right now, currently sitting in British Columbia, we have operations around the planet. And one of the things we're doing in British Columbia is building out a farm research institute called Cloud Mountain Farm and Research Institute, where we're putting into demonstrable practice all of the concepts. And really this underscores the whole thing, is not continuing to add noise to an already noisy environment, but to provide practical, experiential solutions. The world doesn't need another book. The world doesn't need another speaker. The world doesn't need more communication. The world needs more evidence.
Right.
And so that's what we're focusing on here, is the evidential reality that these truths inhabit. And when somebody can come into an environment and they sleep better, they feel better, their aches and pains disappear. And as the esteemed neurosurgeon, Dr. Jack Kruse, says, the three things that you need to guarantee optimal health are light, water, and conductivity or magnetism.
Right.
This is the same for the earth as well as it is for humans. And when those things are in play, the brilliance of the creation is revealed in that it's a self-healing, self-repairing supraorganism. And that's what we wanted to provide around the world, is environments where people can go and experience the truth, and through experiential reality, bring that truth back to where they have come from. And so that's the long-winded answer to your question.
I'm a little biased because I mean I've had, like I've mentioned, many conversations with you, and I so appreciate the information. And I mean, I can attest to being within that environment, and I've experienced physical and mental and emotional healing. And so these things that you're talking about and you want to expose people to and get them to learn and understand, and then take them out where they come from and apply them there, so that eventually it's a global experience, and I can attest, just in this short time that I've physically been in that presence of what you've created. I mean, it is absolutely true. And I have an understanding, I have a base understanding, and you're definitely helping me to understand all of it, all of the levels and the truths, that, because we have been so deceived. And I think for us, our purpose with sharing this information and getting these conversations out there is that, it's not going to resonate with everyone. It's not, a lot of people won't appreciate some of the conversations, but like we've shared, it doesn't matter. We're trying to reach those that it will resonate with, for them to want to know more and for them to want to apply it in their own lives. And so I'm just so grateful for the opportunity, because you have a lot to share, and I think it's very valuable.
Well, thank you. In addition to all those things, so that people may say, well, why now is the reason why all this stuff is coming out. There's other masters that are on this planet who are revealing themselves. Some of those are, like I mentioned, Jack Kruse, Cliff High, where a lot of people may not like the stylistic way they communicate. However, what is categorically undeniable is that they're communicating truth, and this is truth that's needed at a very timely manner, because the planet is at a crossroads and at a evolutionary juncture. And essentially this is what this is, much like there's another, I think, worthy demonstration of this happening, and that is the YouTube channel Grim Hustle. If you look at it, 3 people started that about a year ago. And why are all these people throwing up their flags right now? Well, because this is the time to find your tribe. And the other good thing about time is time reveals truth. Time never works as an ally of deceit. Time only works as an ally for truth. And so what will be happening over time is we'll be finding out all of the untruths, and the fiction that we've been lied to and inculcated with will be evaporating off and being boiled away by the impending chaos that's about to descend on the planet. And only those who knew truth and implemented truth will be navigating the waters of that river in such a way as to survive what is imminently about to happen. And as we find more and more that the lies we've been told are being revealed, people will be seeking solutions. And it's important that there are islands in the ocean that offer succor and refuge for those seeking real answers. So at this time, it is important to reveal the paths to people so that they may have the ability to choose appropriately. So we're sort of like looking for the tribe who has always known the things that I'll be mentioning, and they just didn't possess the language to articulate it. And one thing that's important for people to understand is there's no condemnation in the chosen path. I mean, even dysfunctional, broken, incorrect paths are lessons and therefore useful. And we've been lied to about what this reality is. And when you have put the pieces back together about what this reality is and how it's only half of the picture, then things become a lot more explainable and a lot more understandable. So, you know, that's the sort of situation now. It's you know, the cocoon of the inception process is no longer needed, and now, both personally and professionally, I'm at a place where I have both the experience and the knowledge to be able to responsibly illuminate some of the choices people may have, and those who want to participate in what we're doing need to be aware of these things now so that they have the opportunity to participate.
Right. So we can direct people to the Harmony Project's website, which obviously I'll put a link in and people will be able to find that. Can you explain how that came about a little bit?
Yeah. So, you know, it was somewhere between my first divorce and my first business failure, around when I was about 27, where I went through a big depression, and through this big depression came out the other side with the awareness that there was an invisible path that I'd basically been on my entire life, and that it was leading me somewhere. And I either had to go and reintegrate into the matrix, or I had to follow this path with complete conviction. I came out the other side of that depression in a 24-hour period, knowing that the path was real and that I was going to follow that. And basically from that moment onward, things began to line up and transform. And then I found myself in Gold River, and the very beautiful artist partner that I had a bed and breakfast called the Butterfly Bed and Breakfast. And it was a sort of like a sanctuary in Gold River. There was no cell phones that worked there. We were right against the forest. And I began literally practicing, you know, Qigong every day, basically devoting myself to this completely. And it was sort of like during a, I guess, quasi-retirement period for myself. I've always been fortunate in business, and I haven't really had a typical 9-to-5 working job since I was 24 years old. And that has afforded me the kind of financial freedom that most people only have when they retire. You know, I've invented a variety of products, and, you know, been lucky and fortunate in my personal life to have the kind of largesse financially to support myself and a lot of other people. And this time I began basically devoting every day, all day long, to this path. And after a while, after a few years, I basically put the question to the universe, well, what is this path called that I've followed faithfully without needing a name? But it had got to the point where I needed some defining characteristics of its identity. And a lot of communication happens in a sort of hypnagogic trance fashion for me, and especially when I'm driving. And literally I was driving, and you know, it said, this is the Harmony Projects, many voices resonating as one. Okay, so that's the name. But still, what does that mean? You know, and over the next 2 years, an unfolding happened where I felt that it was time to put something in the world that marks what this is. But my conscious human brain didn't possess the ability to articulate so many diversified subject matters into a coherent explanation. And I had shares in a web design company at the time, and basically the head designer was going away to the Philippines, and I hadn't gotten him content. I was supposed to get content to him over 3 weeks, and I had come up with nothing. Like, how do you take, I have a very large library, as you know, and how do you take all of the material on there and synthesize it down into something understandable and coherent? It was beyond my conscious human brain to do. And literally, the designer was at the airport going, okay, well, I got 20 minutes. If you don't get me the content in 20 minutes, I'm not going to be here for 3 months. Beside myself, I didn't know where to start, didn't know where to begin, didn't know what to do. And then all of a sudden, just like a radio channel being turned on, all this stuff literally that you're going to read on the Harmony Project page began literally being played in my head. My partner at the time used to be a legal secretary, so she could write like, I think it was 85 words a minute. And, like literally her fingers would be a blur on the keyboard. And she sat down in front of the computer, and I just said, just type out everything I'm saying.
Yeah.
So she basically just typed out everything I was saying verbatim. And you have the Harmony Project webpage. It came out in 15 minutes. We sent it to the designer. Nothing has ever been altered because I don't feel like it's literally from me. I feel like it's from someplace else. People want to put labels on this. Is this channeling? Is it clairaudience? Is it telepathic communication? It doesn't matter. Okay? What does matter is that subsequently all of the information on that website has been validated scientifically. Okay, so how does this all occur? I mean, and when you go through so many mystical, spiritual situations, that's one of many that have happened in my life. At some point, you stop questioning. At some point, I don't need any proof, okay? The proof comes from people who have never encountered this kind of experience. They need proof. They need, evidence. Well, the nice thing for you now is you can go through that webpage and you can check on all the science and all the words used, and they're all exactly accurate. Mm-hmm. So we've had people say, "Oh, the page would be more approachable if you dumbed it down a little bit." Well, no. Okay. When the creation and creator speaks to you through the song of a bird, do you say to the bird, well, you could have, it was good, but you could have been better if you kind of like put some guitar to it. Like when you are encountering something like this, I always find that it's appropriate to have the kind of respect and attitude one has when you walk into a church. You're in a sacred space, you're encountering something sacred. Best shut the fuck up and appreciate it. Right. Oh, and audience, that's going to be the first hint that I am not politically correct. Okay. And as Cliff High himself said, that we live in profane times, so expect profane language. And I happen to agree in essence with a lot of that if you're going to be an authentic communicator, you're not going to tailor your communication to appeal to somebody. That's how salesman works. Okay, I'm not selling anything. I don't care. Turn off right now, and I could care less. Right? I don't care. All right. This is not for me. I already know these answers. These are for people who want to know answers. So my attitude is somewhat brisk and somewhat raw. Also, there's something else that when I was undergoing my shamanic training, took an oath to never charge for teaching or healing. And by the way, no real teacher or healer ever will. Okay. Mm-hmm. And when people say things like, well, what about exchanges of energy? Okay, listen, dummy. There's already an exchange of energy. Okay. That exchange is you're being allowed to be in a position to help somebody. That in and of itself is payment. Because who benefits more? The giver or the receiver of a gift? It's the giver.
Yeah.
Right? So why do you need to be paid on being paid?
Right.
Yeah. We're going to find out that we've really been brainwashed. We've been basically going in through the outdoor, and that's why everything isn't working. Mm-hmm. So when you turn around and you literally invert every little sign in your head to the opposite direction, things start making a lot more sense. So that, in a nutshell, is what this is, what the Harmony Project was, and is and how it got created. What I was told was this is known, as it says in paragraph 3 of the opening statement, this is known by many different names on the planet. The names aren't as important as the fruits. So, for example, one of the precursor movements, one we're allied with, is a place called Damanhur in Italy, and places like Feinhorn, Damanhur. They're all variations of the same theme, and they're all a reawakening of knowledge that we used to have that we need to remember now.
Right.
This knowledge was so profound that it was responsible for supporting a population of arguably between 20 and 40 million people in the Amazon basin. One has not thought through what something looks like that is a self-generating food source. I mean, we think of farms, but farms are an abortion. And what I mean by that is they're an abortion of a process. So in other words, instead of, if you look at a clock, instead of starting at 12, going right around 360 and coming back to 12, a farm, or how we make food for ourselves now, is basically an abortion at 6. It doesn't complete the circle. And what would complete the circle? Well, you gotta ask yourself, how would you choose to produce food in the most efficient and economical way possible? Do you want to be a farmer? Do you want to plant seeds? You want to do that? You want to do back-breaking labor your whole life and think that because you do 16 hours of labor and produce your food, that's somehow superior to other ways? When a society has advanced enough to understand what a forest is, it's a self-generating grocery store. Okay, so then ask yourself what a society would look like who understands this.
Right.
Maybe they'd look like the societies that were in the Amazon. Maybe they'd look like the societies that intentionally created the entire Amazon rainforest, which we now know was the case. The entire Amazon was consciously created as a food forest that would self-regenerate, both generating medicines and nutritionally dense food without needing a lot of human intervention, and it would maintain itself endlessly, and in fact, when humans weren't there, would propagate itself to the point of overgrowing all evidence of humanity and civilization. That is the ultimate manifestation of human genius on this planet. Not the pyramids, not the Eiffel Towers, not all the hubris to human ego that we like to surround ourselves with, but the understanding and the guidance and cultivation of the planet in a way which is beneficial to all organisms. We have had societies in the past that have achieved this state, but they've largely been suppressed and forgotten about for very good, important reasons. And one of the things that's important for people to understand is there's no reason to have fear. If you explore near-death experiences, and I mean verifiable ones where the brain was dead for 20 plus minutes and no damage happened afterwards, these aren't all near-death experiences, but the ones that qualify as categorically undeniable medical miracles largely communicate the same reality. They communicate a reality that is much more complex and much richer in purpose than we are led to believe here. And as Cliff High talks about, this is occurring right as the planet itself is coming out of many thousands of years of vibrational darkness. The esteemed science philosophers of India created a name for this phase, and it's called the Kali Yuga. It essentially means a phase of low vibrational input onto the planet, like a winter, if you will. And we are coming out of winter to spring and summer. And because we're coming up from below the galactic ecliptic to above the galactic ecliptic as a solar system, we're now being bathed in much more cosmic energy, and all sorts of things are going to be transforming on the planet. And this is evidenced by the old regime and the old system beginning to rot and collapse, being replaced by a new system. I would tell people to maybe check out a near-death experiencer called Howard Storm on The Future. He was showing what the planet's going to look like 200 years from now, and it doesn't look like Blade Runner or Star Wars or Star Trek, okay? And I would suggest people look at the Kogi in the Columbia Sierra Nevada mountains. They did a documentary called Path of the Heart, I believe, and they call themselves the Elder Brothers. They're pacifistic. They maintain and work with the Earth grid in that part of the world. And, this is basically the introduction to an iceberg topic. No matter what we discuss here, it's only going to be the tip of that iceberg. People are still going to need to, pursue this on their own time, because the concepts aren't that difficult to communicate fairly quickly. But it's living those concepts and understanding those concepts at the same time as the world you were raised to participate in begins to disintegrate around you.
Right.
That's the challenge that lies ahead for people.
Yeah. And we'll definitely go into conversations that have to do with the programming, NLP, hypnosis, all of that, because that right there could be many conversations. And even with awareness, as I have gained before I met you, and of course since I've met you, and it's a process, because the programming runs far deeper than anyone could possibly realize. And even with someone who has awareness, it's truly a work to get rid of that programming, and NLP is definitely the tool. And
for people who don't know, NLP stands for neuro-linguistic programming.
Right.
And a little trick with English and scientific terminology is just say it in the reverse order to derive its meaning. So neuro-linguistic programming would be programming linguistically the neurons of the mind. Okay, so that means utilizing language to program your brain. And why is this important? Because of the concept neuroplasticity. So the brain is one of the most changeable organs in the human body, and it can rewrite itself physically when you alter the thinking patterns. So in order for this illusionary reality to be foisted on people, it required a very sophisticated mind control matrix, because people inherently know that what they're doing is basically upside down.
Mm-hmm.
But
this inverted reality, as you've referred to.
Right, it's inverted, and you inherently know this, but you're surrounded since you're born with a matrix of lies.